Hello and greetings to all viewers. In the last video of this series I talked about the fall of European civilization during the 4th and 5th centuries. Whilst Europe was going through the Dark Ages, the Islamic civilization rose and became the dominant civilization on Earth. In this video I will discuss the Abbasid Caliphate from 833 AD to 1258 AD. The first few centuries of this period are known as the Golden Age of Islamic science. But that golden age came to an end in the early 12th century, and the Abbasid dynasty fell just over a century later. In this video we are going to look at the cultural dynamics leading up to that collapse. As we will see, there are many similarities between the end of the Golden Age of Islam and the fall of Roman civilization a few centuries earlier. Just like in Rome, the Islamic world went through a shift in their thinking, away from rationality and towards dogmatic acceptance of tradition. The Mu'tazila school of philosophy became the dominant school of thought in 833 AD, aided by the Caliph Al-Ma'mun. This was a school of philosophy that focused very much on rationality and logical thought. It would be incorrect to say that the Mu'tazilis were entirely free from dogma. The tenets of Islam were their intellectual starting point and their ultimate frame of reference. However, they had a very much less dogmatic approach than other Islamic schools of philosophy. They allowed their thinkers a relatively free rein to pursue science without interference from religion. In Islamic jurisprudence at that time, a principle called ijtihad encouraged scholars to apply their own judgment to moral issues. I don't think it permitted them to go as far as to contradict the Quran or Sunnah, but it was still a much less dogmatic approach than the alternative school of thought, known as taqlid. Now that I've described the intellectual environment of the 9th and 10th centuries, it's easy to see why their society prospered as it did. Two great centres of learning rose to prominence, one in Baghdad, named the House of Wisdom, and another at Corvador, now in Spain. A third, less prominent centre of learning was established in Cairo. During the Golden Age of Islam, great thinkers produced incredible advances in almost every area of science. There was also great architecture, poetry and art, as one would expect of a flourishing civilization. Unfortunately, this period of greatness did not last forever. Just like the Romans before them, the Muslim world experienced a shift in their thinking. They shifted away from free thought and scientific inquiry, and towards the dogmatic acceptance of traditional views. Al-Ashari, in 912 AD, was one of the first to begin attacking the rationality of the Mu'tazilite philosophy. Traditionalist and anti-rationalist views became widespread amongst the population, even while the Mu'tazilis were making great intellectual achievements. Eventually, the traditionalists became powerful enough to hold back scientific progress. In 1111 AD, a book called The Incoherence of Philosophers was written by Imam Al-Ghazali. This is often seen as a turning point in this cultural shift. The book was written to oppose teachings of certain Mu'tazilite philosophers, particularly Ibn Sina and al-Farabi, because Ghazali felt that their teachings came into conflict with the Quran and the Sunnah. Ghazali did not see himself as opposed to science. He greatly valued certain applications of science, such as medicine. What he opposed was the free thought and rationalism which lay behind the scientific method. This is a little like attacking the foundations of a building whilst hoping to carry on living in it. I'll give you an example of a passage from his book to illustrate his thinking.
Our opponent claims that the agent of the burning is the fire exclusively. This is a natural, not a voluntary agent, and cannot abstain from what is in its nature when it is brought into contact with a receptive substratum. This we deny, saying, the agent of the burning is God, through his creating the black in the cotton and the disconnection of its parts, and it is God who made the cotton burn and made it ashes, either through the intermediation of angels or without intermediation. For fire is a dead body, which has no action, and what is the proof that it is the agent? Indeed, the philosophers have no other proof than the observation of the occurrence of the burning, when there is contact with fire, but observation proves only a simultaneity, not a causation, and in reality there is no other cause but God.
Ghazali argues that people should simply accept that God is the cause of all things, and that searching for a natural cause is pointless. Of course, if we did not understand that diseases have natural causes, the field of medicine would be dead, and we would be powerless to do anything other than pray for healing. Every other field of science would also die for the same reason if we replaced our natural explanations with God did it. Ghazali's views represent and promote the Asharite school of Islamic philosophy. From this point on in history, the Asharite school of thought gradually became more dominant in Islamic society, replacing the Ghazali school of thought. The book, The Incoherence of Philosophers, was highly influential in the Islamic world, and Ghazali is still considered one of the greatest Islamic scholars of all time. As their culture turned more towards traditionalist thinking, scientific progress in the Muslim world slowed dramatically. It did not stop completely, but great thinkers became the exception rather than the norm in Islamic society. Meanwhile, we see a similar shift from rationality to dogma in Islamic legal thinking. I have already mentioned ijtihad, the principle of independent judgment. In the 10th century, this was stopped in Sunni Islam, and taqlid, the opposite, became the dominant principle of Islamic jurisprudence. Strangely, Islamic civilization did not prosper with this more dogmatic intellectual culture. Muslim armies began to suffer defeat in battle, and the Caliphate soon shrank. The three major Islamic centres of learning were lost. In 1171 AD, Saladin brought an end to the Fatimid dynasty in Egypt, because he considered them heretics. He pillaged the public library of Cairo. This was the third greatest Islamic centre of learning. In 1236 AD, Corvador in Spain, the second greatest centre of learning, fell into Christian hands. I'll be saying more about this in the next video. In 1258 AD, Baghdad was sacked during a Mongol invasion. The House of Wisdom was destroyed. This event is generally taken as the end of the Abbasid dynasty and the end of the golden age of Islam. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you found it interesting. If you liked it, please subscribe. You can also leave comments to let me know what you think. The next video in this series is going to look at the Renaissance and Enlightenment in European history. That's the point at which Europe began to let go of their dogmatic thinking and embrace science, rationality, and came out of the Dark Ages. I'm also planning to make a video about science and modern Islamic culture, a little spin-off from this series, so that's something else you can look out for if you're interested. Thank you once again, and goodbye.